Hello, I'm so happy you're here. My name is Eugenie Kruger, also known as Eugenie, and I'm a homeopath with a mission. I want to empower families worldwide with the knowledge of using homeopathy to treat themselves, their children, their pets, and even their plants. Homeopathy is one of the safest, most effective, and cheapest natural medicines on the planet. And I hope this 30-minute introduction video will really encourage you to give it a go for yourself. Homeopathy is going through a revolution worldwide at the moment, and I'm excited for you to come and join us. This 30-minute video will just give you a quick taster of homeopathy, and we'll have some more videos available on our website, so keep an eye on there. So I'd like to kick it off by telling you a little bit about how I discovered homeopathy, or rather how homeopathy found me. So in 2010, I had started becoming interested in natural living. I was growing some veggies, I had some chickens, I was working in a health shop, and I thought, hey, I'm going to become a naturopath. It sounds like a lot of fun. So one of our first papers in the 4-year qualification was an introduction to homeopathy. Now, even though I had worked in a health shop, I had no idea what homeopathy really was. I thought it was a broad term for natural living. It didn't really interest me, and I tried to get out of the paper, but I couldn't. So I reluctantly walked into that first lecture, and an hour later I walked out straight to the registrar's office and changed my pathway to become a homeopath instead. Why? Because I had my proverbial eureka moment. My husband and I were thinking of starting a family in the next year or two, and in this hour I learned how homeopathy can be used on newborn babies from the second they're born, and on mothers, pregnant mothers, and how it's got no contraindications. You can use it alongside pharmaceutical medications, you can use it in the elderly, you can use it on your pets, and even on your plants. It sounded almost too good to be true, because working in a health shop, I knew that a lot of supplements and herbs cannot be used when you're pregnant, same as with a lot of essential oils are contraindicated in pregnancy, and same with newborn babies. You can't use a lot of herbs and supplements and essential oils on them. And definitely the same goes for pharmaceutical medications. So to learn that there was something safe and natural and effective and cheap that I could use when I became pregnant and on my newborn baby was just absolutely amazing for me. So fast forward a little bit, and I have my son in 2011 and my daughter in 2014, and they are two of the healthiest kids you have ever met. They're hardly ever sick, and when they are, it takes them a day or two and then they're over it. They've never needed antibiotics or any of the other commonly used pharmaceutical medication. So I have so much to thank homeopathy for, and I want to share that passion and that knowledge with you, because I remember so well being a new mother, holding that baby in my arms, and that first fever when they were teething, that first cold and cough, and knowing that I have something safe and effective that I could use to treat them was so empowering for me as a parent. So if you are thinking about starting a family in the future, or you have a new baby, I've been where you are. I know what that feels like, having this new little person in your hands and knowing that you're solely responsible for them. So believe me, homeopathy is going to be a game changer for you. So come on this ride with me and discover why over 500 million people worldwide choose to use homeopathy. So firstly, I'd like to share with you a little history about homeopathy. It was started by German physician Samuel Hahnemann in the 1790s, and he lived from 1755 to 1843. Now, if your maths is good, you've probably worked out that he was 88 years old, which is pretty impressive for those times, so he was doing something right. Now, in that time, a lot of bloodletting and mercury was used as standard treatments of the day, and Samuel felt this couldn't be right, there had to be a better way. So he left mainstream medicine and decided to become a translator instead, because he could speak 9 different languages. As luck would have it, he came to translate a herbal text, and in it, it said that cinchona, or Peruvian bark, is useful in malaria because the herb is astringent and bitter. Now Samuel thought this can't be right, because there are other herbs that are more astringent and more bitter than cinchona, and that's not helpful in curing malaria. So he did an experiment. He took tiny little bits of cinchona over a period of a few days and suddenly developed fevers and chills and symptoms that's similar to malaria. So he made the conclusion that cinchona, or Peruvian bark, is useful in treating malaria because it can produce symptoms of malaria in a healthy person. So this is how homeopathy was born, and homeo is the Greek word for similar, and pathy is the Greek word for disease or suffering. So homeopathy literally means similar suffering or similar disease, and it's based on the principle of like cures like, which we will go over very shortly. So what is homeopathy? It might be easier telling you what homeopathy is not. It's not essential oils, it's not herbs, it's not naturopathy. It is its own standalone form of natural medicine that's been around for over 200 years. The British royal family have been using homeopathy since 1845, when Queen Victoria first introduced it to the family, and Prince Charles has been a very big advocate of homeopathy for a very long time. We also know that the Queen Mother has been using homeopathy all her life, and she lived to be 101, so she's doing something right. And Queen Elizabeth never travels anywhere around the world without her extensive selection of homeopathic remedies. Now, if the royal family doesn't impress you, then how about these celebrities? And I'm going to read it off because there's so many. Mark Twain, David Beckham, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Cher, Cindy Crawford, Paul McCartney, Tina Turner, Usain Bolt, Kate Blanchett, Jennifer Aniston, and Jade Jagger. Just to name a few, there's many more who have all spoken out about their love of homeopathy. Now, as I mentioned before, homeopathy is based on the principle of like cures like. Now, that means that something that can cause a symptom in a healthy person can cure that same symptom in a sick person. And if I've completely confused you, let me give you a few examples. I'm sure most of you have chopped an onion at some stage in your life, and as you'll probably know, it very likely would have made your eyes stream quite a bit. Now, we have an amazing homeopathic remedy which is useful for hay fever and colds, where one of the main symptoms is that the eyes are streaming. And this remedy is called allium cepa, and it's made from the onion. Now, anyone who has ever had too much coffee will probably know that it can make some of us a little bit jittery, a little bit anxious, and we might have some trouble sleeping. Now, if one of your main complaints is insomnia or feeling of jitteriness or anxiousness, you might like to use the remedy coffea, and you can probably guess what that's made from. Coffee. Now, another example is for those of you who might have stinging nettle in your garden, and if you've ever been unlucky enough to touch it, you might have had what's called an urticarial rash or hives on your hands, which can be quite burny and painful. Now, a few years ago, I had a friend who tried a new moisturizer, and her whole skin broke out in hives. Now, we gave her the remedy Urtica urens, and you can probably guess what it's made from. Stinging nettle. Now, let me give you another example. A few years ago, my children both had conjunctivitis that they picked up at their daycare centre. I used a homeopathic remedy called pulsatilla, and their symptoms were gone within a day. Later on that evening though, about 2 a.m, I woke up and I felt something wasn't quite right. I got up, went to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and my eye was swollen shut. It looked like a big red golf ball. So I had a very bad case of conjunctivitis. My symptoms were obviously quite different to my children's and much more intense. Now, I hadn't been stung by a bee, but it looked as if I had been due to the redness and the swelling. And those of you who have been stung by a bee will know what I'm talking about. So I used the remedy Apis, and within a few hours, my swelling went right down and my eye was back to normal. Now, you may have guessed that remedy Apis is made from the honeybee. Now, if you're vegan, don't be alarmed, because very shortly I'm going to show you how the homeopathic remedies are made and how we only need teeny tiny amounts of animal and insect substances to make enough remedies for the whole world. So let's chat about homeopathic remedies. What are they? It's what we call our homeopathic medicines. So we don't call them a supplement or an oil or anything like that. We talk about them as homeopathic remedies. They come in teeny tiny little sugar pills, or you can get them in drops or in a spray, sometimes in a powder. Our homeopathic remedies are made from plants, mineral and animal substances, and although nobody really knows how many different homeopathic remedies there are worldwide, it is estimated that we have over 8,000 different remedies. When you look at the label of your homeopathic remedy, it will have a name on there as well as a number and a letter. Now, in this case, I have Arnica 30C in my hand. Arnica is the name for Arnica montana, which is the little flower that the remedy is made from. there's a 30 and a C, and that tells us the potency of the remedy, which we will tell you about shortly as well. So remember how we talked about that onion that's really good for hay fever and colds with streaming eyes? Now imagine we take that onion, we crush it up, and we take 1 drop of that onion juice and add it to 99 drops of water and alcohol. Now the alcohol is just there to preserve it. Now we have 100 drops in total, and we shake this onto a hard surface that's called succussing, and now we have what's called a 1C potency. C stands for centesimal, which means 100. Now if we take 1 drop of this 1C and add it to 99 drops of water and alcohol, and then we succuss it, we have a 2C. If we take 1 drop of the 2C, add to 99 drops of water and alcohol and succuss it, we have a 3C. So you can probably see where I'm going with this. Now, usually for home prescribing, you would use a 6C, a 30C, or sometimes a 200C. But as practitioners, we have remedies that go up in potency up to 1,000,000. So we really have an endless amount of tools at our disposal to help people. So if you have tried lots of other modalities and nothing's helped, give homeopathy a try, because with over 8,000 remedies in potencies of up to 1,000,000, chances are good we'll be able to help you. Now you also might have noticed on some labels of homeopathic remedies it says 6X. Now X is the Roman numeral for 10, which means we start off with 1 drop mother tincture, or 1 drop of onion, to 9 drops of water and alcohol, and then we succuss it. And usually up to a 6X, which is what we call a tissue salt, and you will often see these tissue salts sold in health shops all over the world. So how do homeopathic remedies work? The quick answer is, we don't know yet. But if we observe the effect that homeopathic remedies have on our bodies, we can assume that this energetic force that is released by diluting and succussing our remedies is able to enable our vital force to heal itself. That is that innate or inbuilt healing ability that all of us have within us. When we cut ourselves, our body heals itself. When we have a cold, we sneeze and our body creates balance, and we're well again within a few days. Now, the Indians talk about prana, and the Chinese have talked about qi for many thousands of years. So in homeopathy, we just call this principle the vital force. Now, because I am trying to keep this introduction video to 30 minutes, instead of going into long-winded explanations for why we think homeopathy works, I'm going to refer you to my podcast, Homeopathy Hangout, which you can find on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and most other platforms. Now, in episode 1, I have an interview with Amy Lansky, who is an ex-NASA scientist turned homeopath, and she has some great explanations in there for possible theories on how homeopathy works. I'm also going to give you a couple of tasters just to spark your interest. The first one is from the amazing Dr. Bruce Lipton, author of The Biology of Belief, and he explains homeopathy at the level of quantum physics and how it's the hydrogen bonds between the water molecules that are sending the messages to each other. You can pause the video right here and have a read of the slide. Another possible explanation for how homeopathy works can be found in the book Hidden Messages in Water by Dr. Masato Emoto. And he talks about how water has a memory, and that also can be used to explain how our remedies are able to capture the essence of the substance that they are made from. And my favorite movie of all time, Frozen 2, is also about how water has a memory. So I am very excited that a whole generation of children are growing up knowing that water has a memory. So as you can see, there is something magical that happens when we take a crude substance and dilute and succuss it down to infinitesimally small amounts, which then releases this energetic potential of the substance that we have started. And this is then able to stimulate our vital force to heal itself on a mental, emotional, and even spiritual level. Now, if you think that homeopathy is still a little bit strange, I want to challenge your thinking just a little bit with some thoughts. Number 1, nitroglycerine is used in a 0.4% dilution under the tongue, and it stops a heart attack in its tracks. Now, where have we heard of ultra dilutions before? Certainly sounds familiar, doesn't it? Now, if you are somebody that has allergies, your doctor may have suggested allergy immunotherapy to you. Now, this is something that's used in conventional medicine where, for example, grass is ground down to very small amounts and then injected into the body over a period of time. Treating like with like. Where have we heard about that before? It's sounding familiar, isn't it? What about snake venom? We have a lot of that in Australia. Imagine you get bitten by a snake. There is nothing in the world that's going to stop a reaction to that snake bite except for a medication made from the venom of the snake itself. Homeopathy is certainly not sounding so strange anymore, is it? So what are you going to need to get started? You're going to need a really good homeopathic kit because I promise you, your child's ear infection is not going to be at 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. It's probably going to come on at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning. So you want to make sure you have at least 30 or 100 of the most commonly used remedies on hand so you're prepared for anything. Now, my line of remedies come in amber glass, not in plastic, and it also has waterproof labels on it, which means that years down the track, you're still going to be able to read what's on there instead of a paper label, which often can rub off after a year. We also have waterproof dots on the top of all of our remedies on the lids so that you can easily find your remedy. When you're in a panic and trying to find your remedies, they're very easy to find. And our labels are beautifully colored, so you can easily distinguish one remedy from another. You can also use our larger bottles to top up your own smaller bottles, which definitely makes homeopathy a very cost-effective choice for the whole family. You're also going to need a good home prescriber's book. And if you don't want to invest in a book straight away, there are some excellent resources online, and there are even some wonderful apps these days that you can use to quickly find a remedy to help your family. How often you should give your homeopathic remedy is going to depend on the complaint, and we'll cover this in more depth in our future courses. But as a guideline, generally for acute conditions, we might give 2 little pilules every 15 to 30 minutes for about 4 to 6 doses, and we'll call this a loading dose. And then afterwards, we usually decrease the frequency of the remedy. But that's just a general guideline. People often ask me if they can give 2 remedies at the same time. It's usually best to give 1 remedy at a time, but look, I know when it's 2 a.m. and your child is screaming and in pain, we don't always think very clearly. So if you need to, you can use 2 or 3 remedies, put it in a water bottle, shake it, and then 1 sip will count as 1 dose. Now, it is recommended not to brush your teeth with mint toothpaste or eat or drink for 15 minutes before and after taking your remedy. You also need to tip the pilules into the lid and then straight into your mouth. Don't touch them with your hands. Try to store them away from electrical equipment such as Wi-Fi and cell phones, and try to store them in a dark place away from strong smelling substances such as essential oils. But I have to tell you, in practice, I have found that the remedies are actually not as fragile as we are told. And I've often found that you can use a remedy after you've eaten, but what I would just do is, if you've just eaten something, have some water to clean your palate, then have your remedy, then just wait about 5 minutes before you eat or drink anything else. Also, if you have just touched the remedy with your hand, don't freak out about it, it will still be fine. What I would just suggest is, if for example all your remedies fall out on the floor, best not to put them back in the bottle because they may have been antidoted. And if you've just had your remedy kit in your handbag next to your cell phone for a couple of hours, don't stress out about it, it will still work fine. Just be a bit more careful with not storing your remedies, say, on a microwave or next to a Wi-Fi modem, but short bits of exposure to electronic equipment here and there will be okay. And just for cuteness sake, I'm going to share a little video with you that my daughter did a couple of years ago when she was still quite little on how to take a homeopathic remedy. So I'm going to give you an example of what it looks like in real life when you're going to use homeopathy in your home. So say it's the middle of the night and your child has come down with a fever. Go and grab your book or hop on your app or hop on the website, and you're going to grab your kit because you were prepared and bought one earlier. And then you read through the chapter on fevers and see which remedies most closely suits your child's symptoms. So you read, for example, through Aconite, and it says that it comes on after exposure to cold wind and the symptoms start very suddenly. And you think to yourself, well, what were we doing earlier today? Well, we were at the beach and there was quite a cold breeze that suddenly came up. So maybe I'll start with Aconite. You might give a dose of Aconite, so 2 pilules every 15 to 30 minutes for 4 to 6 doses, and after that, you might find that your child just goes back to sleep and the fever calms down. And then you check them in the morning and they might still be a little bit warm, so maybe you give 1 more dose of Aconite and then you clear the woods. But if the 4 to 6 doses of Aconite didn't work, you go back to your book, have a little read through it all again, and have a little think of what else might have happened or what else might have caused this symptom to happen. So maybe you were at the beach because you were at a birthday party, and maybe your child ate a lot of junk food which they don't normally eat. So maybe it was overindulgence that produced these symptoms. And then you find in your book that Nux Vomica is a really good remedy for symptoms that come on after indulgence. So you grab your Nux Vomica, you take 2 pillules every 15 minutes for 4 to 6 doses, and then see how your child goes after that. Now that you've had a super quick overview of homeopathy, let me introduce you to some friends. Our first friend is Arnica, which I'm sure most of you would have heard of. Many people have used Arnica without even realizing that it's homeopathic because it's available in most health shops and even pharmacies. Arnica is brilliant for bruising and bleeding. It's really our first remedy that we think of for any sort of trauma and shock. It's even helpful after intense exercise. A lot of top-level athletes use it, and it's even a great remedy for jet lag. It helps the circulatory system work a lot better, and it's even helpful for blood clots. Now, let me share a story with you of one of the many times when Arnica has saved our family. Now, when my son was about 18 months old, we had a toddler versus coffee table incident. Toddler 0, coffee table 1. So we raced to the emergency room because the cut was so deep and he needed stitches. That was around 5 p.m. Now, I gave him some Arnica straight away. The bleeding stopped straight away. And unfortunately, or fortunately, Arnica is such a great remedy for trauma and shock that my son was so calm after this whole ordeal. So we were in the waiting room at the emergency and he was moving around chairs and climbing around, and the staff obviously realized that this child is so calm, so they didn't prioritize him at all, and we didn't get him stitched up until 1 a.m. that next morning. So believe me, I did consider pinching him just a little bit to make him cry, but really, it just showed me once again how amazing Arnica is for not only stopping that bleeding in its tracks straight away, but also with the emotional shock and trauma of the accident. So Arnica almost worked a little bit too well. Our next friend is Aconite. Aconite is a remedy that is really useful for very sudden onset of symptoms, and we use it usually within the first 24 to 48 hours of the onset of symptoms. It might be a good remedy for exposure to cold, especially cold wind, or if there's been a frightful incident, or maybe there's been a shock. Now, this could be, for example, the shock of being in a car accident or an earthquake, or even some children who might have witnessed something really frightening. For example, something on TV that was very scary, and then it leads them to having night terrors, or maybe they've been in a car accident or an earthquake, and ever since then they've become very frightful. So do think of Aconite for that mental emotional shock. It's also such a brilliant remedy for nipping colds in the bud, and I have lost track of how many times Aconite has saved our family from getting a cold. That first little feeling of a sniffle or a sore throat or a sore ear, a few doses of Aconite, symptoms are gone. Now, Arsenicum is another one of our friends that is so useful for food poisoning or gastro, UTIs or urinary tract infections, as well as anxiety. Such a great remedy to have on hand. It's even a great remedy that you can give prophylactically. If somebody in your household has symptoms of gastro, you can give everyone else in the household a dose of Arsenicum to stop them getting gastro, as well as using Arsenicum to treat the person in the household who does have gastro. Now, I have to share a quick little story with you, because when my son was about 2 years old, me and my husband and him all had food poisoning. It was not a pretty sight. Believe me, when you have got food poisoning, it's really hard to look after a toddler and your husband. And Arsenicum saved us. We had a few doses every 15 minutes, and within a couple of hours, we were all so much better. So I have a very special place in my heart for Arsenicum. Now, Belladonna is our next friend. This remedy has a lot of heat and intensity in it, and also the symptoms come on quite suddenly. It's one of our top remedies for fevers. It can also be used for measles, be used for sunstroke. It's got so many different uses. Now, I have another story for you. When my daughter came along about 6 months in, I had my first ever bout of mastitis. It hit me out of nowhere for 6. I was delirious with the pain and my breasts were throbbing. It was so painful. Now, one of the keynote symptoms of belladonna is fever with delirium when you're just a little bit out of it. And I just remember thinking, oh, I'm delirious, that's belladonna. I took a dose of belladonna every 15 minutes for a few doses, and within a couple of hours, my symptoms of mastitis was gone. Now, I cannot tell you how many women I know of that have round after round of antibiotics for recurrent mastitis. So if I can just give you this little bit of advice, tell your friends about belladonna for mastitis. It can really save them, because once you've been on those antibiotics and it goes through your breast milk to the baby, it can really muck around with their gut. So give the belladonna a try. And our last friend is Nux Vomica. It is our top remedy for overindulgence of all sorts. It might have been when your children have gone trick-or-treating at Halloween and they're just all feeling a bit icky and yucky afterwards. It might be your husband who's got a hangover after a work function. It might be if you've just gone out for a meal and eaten very rich or fatty foods that you're not usually used to. Then Nux Vomica is absolutely wonderful. It's a really good remedy for indigestion and constipation, as well as diarrhea and all sorts of just tummy upsets and aches. It is definitely a remedy that you should always have in your first aid kit. But wait, there's more. I'm going to leave you with a screenshot here of some of our other wonderful remedies that can really make a difference in your life. Now, when you're deciding what remedy to give, it's always a good idea to consider the etiology or the cause. So have a little think about what happened before the symptoms started. If it was due to exposure to cold, then maybe aconite will be your remedy. If it was after a grief, so say for example, your partner had to go away for work for a few days and then suddenly your child develops this cough because they're really missing their parent, then maybe the remedy Ignatia might be a good remedy, which is a great remedy for grief and loss and disappointment. So have a little think about what might have caused the symptoms, and then when we treat the cause, symptoms will go away. Also consider what is strange, rare, or peculiar about the case. Now, if your child is normally a hot body, and then they become sick and suddenly they want you to close all the windows and have 5 blankets wrapped up around their head and all over their body, that might mean they need their remedy pepper salt, which is a remedy that really likes to be wrapped up warm and they don't like any freezers. If your child is normally Mr. or Mrs. Independent, and suddenly when they're sick they become very clingy to you, it might mean they need the remedy pulsatilla, which has a lot of clinginess in the symptom picture. So if you're tossing up between a couple of remedies, always be investigative. Think about what is strange about this, what happened just before the symptoms started, and then you will find that unique remedy that will really fit your child's case. And yes, it does take a bit of practice, but I promise you, every time you get that right remedy and you get great results, it's going to be boosting your confidence and you're going to become a better and better home prescriber. So thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. I really appreciate it. I hope you found this information helpful. And if you would like to order a kit or would like to make a booking, visit my website, eugeniekruger.com. And I would also love it if you could listen to my podcast, Homeopathy Hangout. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best in health and happiness.